Alright, I'm live. First off, let's do this. What? What is he even doing? I'm not sure if it's working. I don't even know how to tell.
He's plugging himself.
Oh, we just have a delay. There we go. Hopefully it didn't interrupt everything. Let's see. I don't even know the best way to view comments. Let's see. Usually I go to... let's go to YouTube and just view it. Sorry about figuring this out. A bit dense sometimes, as we all are when we're playing with stuff that we haven't done before, which is fine. But my channel, excuse me. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I don't think I have anybody, so I'm not too worried about that. Then playbacks, view. All right. So first thing I wanted to talk about, Vox did a good. He released his new Voxiversity today, which was on gammas. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a interesting structure that he's kind of put together, and people have heard of like the alpha and beta, and in like dating and the sexual interactions or whatever. I don't know, like the alpha male and the beta whatever. Vox has kind of taken that concept and just kind of adjusted it for, not really just morphed it, I guess you could say, but filled it out for an explanation on how he views relationships between people. And if you don't know what the thumbnail was, which I would be surprised if you saw the thumbnail because I just had it up for a really short time, but it was just what's called a Mandelbrot. Now a Mandelbrot it's a structure that it's a mathematic graph that as you zoom in on a section of it, it shows so it looks like first it looks like a big circle that has a point, right? And it has a bunch of these little kind of really detailed parts. If you zoom in on that detailed part, it shows that circle and the point again. And then it goes through, and as you zoom in more and more and more, it just kind of repeats itself, just getting closer and closer and closer. One of the parallel programming classes that I took, we used the Mandelbrot to, first we did it in just an algorithms class where we had to generate a Mandelbrot just from the formula, I think it was. And so basically we iterated over each pixel, and we gave it a where your viewpoint was, and you would see what it looked like from that viewpoint. So you had like the frame of where your viewpoint was, and then you had to calculate where each pixel, what each pixel's color and stuff was for the whole thing. And then in another class we did we were trying to make a genetic algorithm. So it's a version of AI that would guess the formula for a Mandelbrot by taking a Mandelbrot image and starting from nothing and then trying to make it match what that image was. And it just loosely follows concepts that you find in like evolution and stuff like that. You have a mutation and you have a population, and the population has a certain rate of die out and certain rate of random mutation and a certain rate of crossover, and you have multiple populations that come together. And it's a way of making approximates. Really, really silly way to do something, but for doing something complex like that, it's kind of fun. And it does have its uses, but it's not by any means a common thing to do. But anyways, the thing that's interesting, and the reason I brought up the Mandelbrot is because Vox says that it's fractal. He often says it's fractal. And I don't think a lot of people understand that term. That term fractal is showing this reference where you can zoom out and see a picture, and then you can zoom into one little section of that picture and see the same picture. It's a fractal. It goes over and over and over and repeats itself. And there's a few different famous fractals. We did the Mandelbrot. We did one that's called a Buddhabrot. That's basically a three-dimensional Mandelbrot, so you can look in three-dimensional if you change your viewpoint and stuff like that, and it does the same type of thing. And they're just mathematic constructs, and I don't know too much where they excuse me, where they came from. Sorry, I've got a bit of a problem with my lungs that I've been dealing with. But one of the things that that Vox talked about was he talked about gammas today, and he talked about how you have gammas that he's explained what a gamma is several different times, and I always thought it was interesting. There's like the alpha, and that's the person that is, if you look at this hierarchy as like a power structure. The alpha will be the leader. He'll be the person who is the leader, and he's gone into things that his first Voxiversity on this I think he calls it the socio-sexual hierarchy, but his first video, his first Voxiversity was on alphas, and they play a huge role in leading, making decisions, being a strong role model, and then also taking care of other people. And he just goes over different traits and stuff, and it's easy to get caught up on the label, the name, the position, but really it's a role that someone plays within a certain situation. It's a behavior pattern. It's not a okay, I found this person, put him in this box, which the behavior pattern, you oftentimes reflect that, and you can change them out without being incorrect, kind of, but the very fact that it's the way that you behave in a certain situation tells kind of what he's trying to describe and what he's trying to relate to everybody. Well, he was talking about gammas today, and a gamma is, first off, they're the people who are like, typically they're smarter than average, but they're very a pain. Sorry, Vox kind of attributes himself as what he calls a sigma, which I can talk about later. Anybody who's watching this probably already knows, but he personally really dislikes and doesn't get along with gammas. And I suspect, I don't know, and he's obvious. I think he's probably a lot smarter than I am on this. Well, he is, but I suspect that part of the reason he dumps on gammas so much is because his personal he doesn't get along with them. But the traits that I've come across that he attributes to that gamma behavior is someone who is a specialist in a specific field. So they you take, whether it's trivia, whether it's a certain engine part or a certain this, or I'm thinking engine part because I work with engineers and software developers and stuff like that, and I think that I work with a lot more people that act like gammas, you know. And he so he's taken these, so a gamma, they're a specialist in their field. They are, one of the traits that he said is they always lie. They always lie, whether that's to themselves or to other people. They always lie, and I think that what goes with that is they're always trying to make themselves look the best, in the best light. They're putting themselves in the best light, putting others in a bad light, and so they can't handle and they can't stand it when somebody puts them in a bad light and they can't defend themselves, or they can't change how does he say it? It's pretty funny how he says it. Change the game, or change the winning, whatever is winning. Anyways, so a gamma, they always kind of lie to themselves, and I would say if you look at it from the perspective of a gamma, they probably don't think of themselves as lying. They're convincing themselves of a reality around them, and they're kind of making up, and he calls it the bubble, which is a very, very good way to describe it. But they make a bubble around themselves of their reality, and they live within this bubble and this reality, and they keep their rules within this reality. And because of that, they don't change. It's a way of lying to yourself, I guess you can say. One of the other things that he attributes to gammas is they're secret princes, or what does he call it? Secret kings. Yeah. So a lot of times they're if people would just notice me, then they would know how awesome I am, or how great I am, or how I should be the boss, or how I should be the this or that. And those are the ones that are off the top of my head, the things that he relates to gammas. Thing that I was trying to figure out, and I think that, so he's talked about a few different hierarchy types, or behavior types. He's talked about the alpha. He's talked about he originally called it betas, but he changed the name to bravos, because it's just, beta sounds, a lot of times you have the beta cucks or whatever, the people who are just the losers, is what the original people who came out with the sexual hierarchy or whatever it is, who came out alpha and beta. Beta was a bad term, but he relates beta or bravo, which he's changed to bravo, which I think is a better name, but he's changed to bravos as people who find an alpha, they stick to him, and they're very loyal, and they help that alpha govern. They're the people who don't necessarily make good choices for themselves for an organization. So if they're in a leadership role, they kind of don't make the best good decisions. But if they have a leader to follow, they make an excellent supporter to that leader. And so typically your alpha will have a few betas around him who he can rely on, who are extremely loyal to him, and he knows how to point them in the right direction. And then the betas will oftentimes help govern deltas. And deltas are the ones who are extremely competent. They don't really, they're considered low on the hierarchy. Again, if you're looking at position in the role, in the behavior roles, but they're the backbone of any organization. They're the ones that they're competent, and they care about competence, and they care about doing getting a good job done. And that's where they gain their satisfaction, is by, oh man, we did a good job on that. Okay, we got this done. We got this. They're not going to be innovative and change things around unless that's part of that competency that they need, unless they need to be innovative and change things around to be competent in their area. He hasn't gone into that too much. And then the gammas are the ones who are very, very smart in one specific field, but they're also very disruptive to an organization, to a hierarchy, because they're kind of pains. They're kind of they need to have that constant praise and that constant stroking of their ego for them to be loyal and stay in line and stay up, continue to do a good job at what they do. Now, one of the things, now he's talked about sigmas as well, and sigma is a term for someone who doesn't really like the hierarchy. They don't really care where they're at in the hierarchy. They're also extremely competent, and so a lot of people find sigmas and think that they're alphas. They think that they're people to follow, but the problem is when they start following an alpha, the sigma they don't have that same sense of take people under their wing. They don't have that sense of protector, that sense of they're at the top, but yet they protect their people. They're, that I don't know if he's called it dual way loyalty, but they don't like to be in charge. They don't want to be the leader. They want to do their own things, and he considers them outside of the hierarchy. because they're disruptors and they don't exactly play nice all the time. And one of the very leading traits that he's ascribed to Sigmas is they're confrontational. They really don't mind being confrontational. Gammas, they're very passive aggressive and they don't like being confrontational directly, but they like the little jabs and the little one-upmans. I got to get my one up on you so to show that I'm better than you, or whatever it is that makes them feel superior in their own mind or in their own bubble. Now, by no means do I think that he's also talked about omegas, I think. And omegas are the actual rejects that, if I remember right, the ones that are hopelessly outside of the hierarchy that don't really... I don't know, he hasn't talked too much about them, but he oftentimes will relate them to people who just don't even have, like, I think he's called people who don't think to shower, because they don't realize that they need to be presentable to other people and stuff like that, and they just have no social know-how. And I've thought of it, and there's a lot of points that he brings up that are really good. One of the things that he that I think is just because of where he's at in developing this concepts is I don't think that the hierarchy is filled out all the way. I think that there's plenty of room for other behavior patterns that aren't actually that he hasn't explained, and because it's fractal, I think that has to be true, because as you get the transition from one viewpoint to another viewpoint where it's similar, that's actually a big transition, and there are different swirls and there are different things and there are different cases and stuff like that. And so just the general, it's kind of at the early stages and the exploratory stages. And I've thought a lot about his structure and stuff, and I've thought myself as a different structure multiple times. But it's interesting. I think I relate. I think I'm fairly self-aware. I think I'm very self-aware. Most people probably consider themselves to be, so that's definitely subjective. But I've tried to. I've looked at different behavioral patterns that I've noticed, and I've noticed different stuff from gamma. I've noticed different stuff from delta. I've noticed different stuff from. Oh, thank you for checking on my car at 11 o'clock or 12, whatever time it is. But I've noticed different stuff from Bravos and Alphas. I've noticed different stuff from Sigmas. The thing that keeps coming back to me is just looking at the way I acted in high school and the way I acted when I was in a big group of people. I was the type of kid who I was I played football on our team, took state. I wrestled 3 of the 4 years. I didn't wrestle my senior year. And then I did sports. We were in a small school. I did a lot of that kind of stuff. But then I did choir. I did drama. I didn't do any band, but I didn't do any AP classes because they were all the scheduling. But I was friends with every group in the sense that there wasn't a group that I wasn't on good terms with, whether it's you have the people who are jocks or the people who are skaters or the people who are choir or band, or the people who do drama, the people who are in the student government. I was friends with everybody, but I would specifically, when I get too close to any group, I would go and find another group. I didn't get too tied to any one group until my senior year, and then there was me and my best buddy, and then 3 other girls that we ran around together, really, really tight-knit group. And that was the first time that I was in an actual group, and it was just 5 of us, And it was one of those things where I I don't know. I always I felt myself like a chameleon almost. Like I didn't. I felt like I was. It wasn't that I was finding myself. I always knew who I was. I was always confident. I was always knew what I liked and what I didn't like, and I wasn't like just trying to explore and discover. I I viewed it as I around different people I would let different parts of my personality show, and I felt that my personality was a big personality, and around different groups I would let that personality show. And one of the things that I would do is, regardless of which group I was in, I would some of my best friends, I would try and find those kids that were, I guess this is a different topic, but I would try and find those kids that were not popular, those kids that were off by themselves, and try and figure out, like, try and find what was interesting about that kid, because most people have something interesting about them. One of my best buddies, I think of three of my best friends. One went on to be biochemist. He's got, I think, a PhD. He's working on his PhD now, or he's a biochemist. He's been doing some crazy stuff. One of them, he does backyard experiments where he's like, when in high school he made a Tesla coil and he gave it to me just because it was cool, and we would just get ourselves shocked, and we'd make our hair stand up and just random stupid stuff. And he was always looking into different physics stuff, and I don't think he ever graduated college because he was terrible at math. He wasn't good at math, but yet he could take most just random parts and put together flamethrowers and put together like just random anything, and it wasn't that he could do it. It was that he enjoyed taking the time to, if I take this bottle of water and leave it on this, will it become a capacitor? Will I be able to store energy in it? Will I be able to do this? And he's figuring out how to do things. And he wasn't. He was just his dad. His dad took us one time to where he worked. He worked for there's a rocket company, and I think he worked for either Space Dynamics Lab or one of the rocket ATK or whatever it is. And I remember we went to his office and stuff, and we were playing with liquid nitrogen, and he was showing us just some of this cool stuff that he did, and then another one of my really good friends, he was, I think he's going into theoretical physics, and he's gotten into some really interesting stuff. And those are the kids that I think I bonded with the most, but it wasn't a group. We weren't in a group and stuff. I didn't run around with them. After, when I was in college, before I got married, most of my college I did through after I got married. I only did one semester, I think, before I got married, but I was living with some of my buddies who were going to college. I was working, and then I took 2 online classes or something. But I would work from 5 in the morning. I think I left at 5 to get there at 6. It was about an hour away. And till like 4 in the afternoon, I would get back, and I'd crash for a couple hours. I'd sleep, and then I'd wake up, and we'd go party for till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd get another 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and then I'd go back and we'd do it again, And it was just one of those things where it's really interesting. A lot of his social sexual hierarchy is focused around, when you're guys, when you get together, the goal is you want to go find the prettiest girls, and that was true for us. But I've always been very religious, very raised in. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and we really just didn't. We don't from a young age. I decided not to have sex before I got married. I decided not to drink alcohol, or to do a lot of the things that you would associate with partying, And so there was a lot of things that we would do, but we were our partying was a lot different than I think what Vox describes. I remember we went and got big wheels one time, and we went into this really steep hill, and we were taking these big wheels and going down this steep hill, and we'd come down this hill, and you turn off into, so it was a street paved road. You turn off onto a sidewalk, and it had a swirly sidewalk. Well, like I remember there was this one night they had these road signs the road was blocked because there was a basketball game or something that night, and instead of turning off, I remember just going straight towards these signs, and I just laid under it. I laid out, and we went right under it, and it was just went right over me, and we were just these big wheels, toys that you would have for kids, but we were taking them, and we were just doing stupid stuff, having fun, and that was a lot of our growing up experience. Was we would go find girls and stuff, but it wasn't with that goal of getting action or getting going too far. It was always just let's go party and have fun. And so a lot of the attributes that he had, like he talks when talking about alphas, he talks about how they have a high rate of infidelity, or the high rate of they're constantly being attractive to and being attracted by beautiful women and stuff like that. And I can see that, but it's the because of the culture that I grew up in, which all of my friends, there was pretty much all of us that were living together. We were all in the same faith, and we all had the same standards, and we would do our best to keep each other to the standards, but we weren't horrible about it. We weren't keeping an eye on each other or anything like that. But it was just hey, you good, and it's we all wanted to do right by God, and so even through those times of party, or those times of when you adolescence, it was always we're always trying to we had different goals. And so I think that changed the structure of our area of that hierarchy. Now that I'm at work and stuff like that, and there's definitely a hierarchy there, but I think because of the way my background, it's interesting. I think that one of the things that I do in our grouping, so we're grouped in teams at my work. So we have a team of 6, 7 of us that are developers, and we all work together. There's about 120, I think, of us total on this 2 apps and a website. It's a pretty big. I mean, it's grown. I've been there for about 6 years now, since 2013, and and it's one of those things where my boss, the guy he's the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer, he's I don't know. I would say that naturally he would have the gamma tendencies. Me and him share a really good love for books, right? And he, one of the books that he loves, absolutely, we both have read and loved, was the Name of the Wind, and that's the book that Vox says he couldn't get through because of the gamma that Koth is, the main character. He's such a gamma, and when he pointed it out, I was like, yeah, it's true. And he's that secret king or that secret prince or whatever. Well, one of those things that's interesting about it is that my boss, he's the type of guy that he is not afraid to make hard decisions, and he'll step up, and he'll be like, he's not afraid to be hard-nosed, he's not afraid to be confrontational, but naturally he doesn't like that confrontation. He doesn't like that to be a jerk and stuff. And it's just kind of interesting to see how that people in different situations, they exhibit different behavioral patterns. While I was doing Granite with my family, I was a crew leader for our night crew, and because I was going to school at the time, and I'm naturally, one of the things that made me question, like, am I a am I a gamma? And I'm not confrontational. I really don't like to be confrontational. But when there's something to do, I have no problem being confrontational when there's a need. Me and a buddy of mine we played football. We were both on the line together in high school. We had a saying where, like, we don't make no trouble, but we're not going to take none either. And that's just kind of our attitude. It's like, yeah, we're cool until we're not, and until you push us too far, and then it's like, okay, there's problems. And when I was a crew leader at the doing granite, it was interesting, and it was easy for me because I had 4 or 5 high school kids, 5 I think, that they would come in at work at night, and it was very important because, one, the pieces of granite that we're working with are extremely expensive. So you're working with a slab of granite, and that slab of granite can be anywhere from $400 to $2,000, and we're cutting it up, we're doing stuff with it, we're moving it around. If it gets dropped, if it gets broken and stuff, depending on how the flow was of the granite, depending on if it had movement in the piece itself. If it has movement in the piece itself, the software that we would use, we would have the customers come in, and they would pick exactly where they wanted their sink to be, where they wanted their island to be, so they could see, like, oh, this big vein, they wanted it in the island where it's predominant and stuff. And if you mess up that vein, you're going to have to call the customers in again and reset it up, or have to there's some accounting for, And so I remember there was one guy, we would put rods on the bottom sides of the granite. So imagine you've got 3 cm granite, so what is it, like 1 1/8 inch? And you flip it over, and then you take a saw that has a blade that's about that thick, and you set the depth of that saw so that the blade is only, maybe a 1/2 inch. And then you have to tighten it, and you cut through a groove in front of where you're going to cut out the sink, and a groove behind where you're going to cut out the sink, and a groove where you're going to have any places that are going to be stressed on this granite. And with that groove, you then cut a piece of rod, a metal rod, or we had fiberglass at certain times, depending on what it was, but some kind of rod that you put in, and you glue it in with an epoxy, just for the sole purpose of making that section more durable. Well, there was one kid, Big Black Mike. He was this black kid. And, it's funny because, like, there's nobody black in our area, except for he was adopted, and so he was a white kid but black. I don't know, but he was such a funny kid, and I just really enjoyed working with him. He was a hard worker. He was a fun to be around guy, athletic, and just really fun. But he was cutting this rod on this really expensive sink. And it was before you'd cut out the sink, obviously, and stuff like that. But he was cutting this rod, and I was across the shop, and I could see that blade just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And I yelled across the shop, and he had his headphones on. And when it's cutting, it's feeding water into it, and so you wear like these jumpsuits that are plastic, you don't get all wet and soaked and stuff. You wear big galoshes and stuff like that. But he was just listening to his music, cutting away, and I yelled, and I ran across the shop, and I got his attention. I was like, Mike, what the hell are you doing? And I was just like, I looked at him, and I looked at it, and I pointed out to him. I was like, you got to look at this. Look at this. Look at how deep your saw is. And it had gotten to the point where I took a light, and I shined it underneath on the shiny side of the granite, and I could see the light coming through. It was really close to just breaking through, and it was a super expensive piece of granite too. And I was just like, I tore into him. Like, I was like, you have got to do better than that. Like, that's, and blah blah blah. And he never made that mistake again. He was a smart kid. He didn't make mistakes like that very often once you brought it to his attention. But there was one other kid that we had who was this skater kid, and he was kind of a punk, he just kind of like just getting by, he didn't want to shake the boat too much, but I could set him to a task, and he would do okay on it, but I found that he was really good at polishing. He was really good at, he just had a natural, careful touch, gentle touch. I don't know what that sounds gay, but he had this way of polishing that was, when you come with like a bullnose over on the front, you want to transition into the top of the granite without touching the factory finished top. And he was really good at it. And so as a leader, I was really good at finding what the people were, what my crew was good at, and I would get them in situations that they would excel at. And when they weren't good at something, I would get them to a level where they were good at it, and I would get them to a level where they knew what to do and how to get things done. And so it wasn't. I mean, again, that was just some high school kids. It wasn't like I wasn't. I mean, there was this one guy that was on our crew for a while that he was older than me, and he had been through a lot. He was a crackhead at one point of his life. Not when he was working for us and stuff. He was clean, and he had been clean for years, but it had left him a little rattled, you know. And he was I really enjoyed working with him, and he was really bright. I think he was probably, well, he told me he was a lot brighter even before he had gone through drugs, you know, and before he had was living on the street and under a bridge and stuff like that. And he was a lot more intelligent then, but I was pretty good at figuring out, making sure that they were happy, making sure they were productive, making sure that, like, taking care of them, and I would fight for them too, like with my family, my bosses. It was my brother and dad owned the business and stuff, and I'd go up to bat for them, you know. And so I've seen that alpha behavior in myself in when I'm put in that position. I've seen myself, like in the current job that I'm at. It's interesting. I don't think it's in tech. There's obviously a lot more gammas than you come to believe, than normal. But we've done a really good job at creating this team atmosphere where you don't have a lot of those strains or those tensions that you get from who's the boss, who's the right guy, who's, you know, everybody has their own role, their own positions and stuff, and those things change, you know. And it's one of those things that that's just kind of the dynamic of the team that we're on now. And so I don't know. I guess the thing that I was getting at is, I think that there's more those behaviors that Vox has isolated and identified: Gamma, Alpha, Bravo, Delta, Sigma, and Omega. That's 6 behavioral patterns. There's a lot more there's a lot more behavioral patterns that either he hasn't noticed or that are uncommon enough to where they don't necessarily fit in those. So that's just I don't know, gammas. I guess I was thinking about it, and Vox the other day, he was asked the question of if he dislikes gammas just because he's a Sigma, and he stopped and he was thinking about it. He did the Jordan Peterson thing. I think he called it out when he did it, but he said he had been thinking about it lately as well. Is if he specifically disliked gammas because of his Sigma tendencies, and I think that there's something to that. I think that he has taken a lot of the characteristics that he really dislikes the most and put them on gammas, and I think most of them fit, but also there's some things that don't fit, just from what I've seen. And as he said, this isn't a scientific analysis. This is at the stage of figuring out what. It's at the climate change stage, where it's just people say that they know what's going on and they have no idea. They're just trying to figure out what's going on. Which global warming is a pseudoscience. Anybody who says differently doesn't know anything about it, or they don't know anything about science. But one of the things that today I started doing, and I got a hand planer, and I started planing some boards, some 2x4s to put together and to laminate together, and I laminated them today. I just glued it, and I don't know how good it's going to be. I've never done this before. This is completely off the cuff for me, and so I have no idea. I got drunk on Ek. The hangover. Oh, I got drunk once. The hangover I had was very bad. I have not wanted to drink since. Good for you not drinking. I'm Protestant, so I make mistakes occasionally. Dude, we all make mistakes. Anybody who says we don't, they're wrong. We're living in a fallen world, you know, and the reason that Christ came was to help save us from our sins. You know, that's just life. And the thing that's really dangerous is, and no one's talked about it, I think Vox has talked about it, is the hero worship. When you start viewing somebody as infallible, as, oh, what that person said it, so I have to believe it. That's a very dangerous place to be in. It's also very dangerous to think that your mistakes are any less severe than others, because that's when pride comes in, and that's when you start thinking, oh, I'm better than this person, or, oh, I can't believe that person did that, you know. And it's just, we're fallen creatures, you know, and that's why Christ came. God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, you know. And anyways, getting back to the, hey, and first off, it's good to see you, man. It's good to see you, Bob. But so I got this planer, and I was hand planing. So I wanted to get an actual planer that's electric, right? Because those things are pretty sweet. But they're also like 400. The one that I was looking at was like $430 or something like that. And I was like, meh, not for this one job that I have, and I don't know how often I'd use it. I couldn't justify it. I probably could have spent some time looking into like renting one or something like that, or asking around, but I don't know. I kind of like to do my own thing, not like to be dependent on other people for that kind of stuff. But so I got this hand planer that was only $35, and first time I've ever used it was today. And I just went out and I planed the sides of 4 2x4s, both sides, and then I glued them together. I put some boards underneath, and I screwed some boards, and I just put some shims in to push them together, and I kind of self-leveled it. But I'm gonna make a little rack for right there. I've got a supercomputer. There's 3 computers that are networked together into a Beowulf cluster, is what it's called. But a supercomputer. Over here, I've got my computer there, and I'm just gonna put some of the cool stuff here once I make that, and so I'm getting kind of excited about that. It's nice to work with your hands. Nice to do stuff with your hands. Once I have that, then I will. I got this kit, this Arduino kit, and so I haven't done much with hardware. But there's this guy that I found him recently on YouTube. He's a kid from Hawaii. His name's Michael Reeves or something like that. But he's pretty coarse. He curses a lot, and he's kind of a jerk and stuff. But he's really funny. And he made a laser where he put two servo motors, so just motors that turn, and they're really accurate. He put one and then another one, so he could rotate this way and then rotate this way. And then on the end of this one, he put a webcam, or he put a laser pen, so it shines a laser. And then he set up a webcam, and you could see, and he had the webcam viewing and detecting facial recognition. And once it found a facial recognition, it moved those 2 servos so that the pen pointed at the to shine the laser in the person's eye. And it was just really stupid but funny. It's hilarious. It's like a 4-minute video, and he just made it work and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I actually pulled down his repo. I found the code for it, and I can copy it from his code. But I think I want to make something more different. I don't know. I want to get something working first, but I'm completely new with hardware. I don't know much about hardware at all, and so this is new ground for me. And so it's probably not going to be soon that I'll have this put together. But I'm excited to start new things and start new projects. I'm one of those guys that I really like to just make new things and start new things. And try and learn little bits. And there's this other guy that I started watching, Mr. Teslonian or something like that. If you look up gasification, what he does is he builds just random stuff. But the first video I saw of his, he took a couple propane tanks, and he cut the top off of one and the top off the other, and he welded them together, the bottom off the other, and he welded a cap, and so and he put it all together. It's this big system where it's like as tall as you are, it's 6 foot or something like that. I don't know how tall you are, but it's just as tall as a person. You put the pellets or whatever, anything that'll burn in the top, and then what it does is it heats it up, but you restrict the amount of oxygen that's in there. You have some flowing oxygen that goes in, but because there's not enough oxygen, it won't burn with a flame, but it heats up because you've got charcoals in there burning it already, and it causes the gas to go through, go out, but the gas is actually flammable. So this gas that because it wasn't burned off, it has energy in it, and so you can take that gas and use it. And he put one of these machines in, not machine, but whatever, this structure in his back of one of his old trucks, and he hooked it up, and he was running his motor on this gas, and he said it's not very efficient or anything. I think he said he calculated it out. It was about a mile per pound, a mile and a half per pound of wood that he was burning, so it's really not efficient. But it was kind of fun, it was kind of cool that he could hook something up into the engine and then just make a way to create energy without having any factories or refineries or oil or whatever it is, anything. But yeah, he could do it with just what he had, and he looked like he lived in Texas or something like that. So he's just out kind of in the middle of no man's land. Why did I go off on that? I don't even remember. Well, I was just going into like how it's fun to learn new things. It's fun to explore new parts of the world that you don't know, and that's just kind of a fun thing to do. Last thing I'll do is I'm gonna read a blog post I put up a few years ago. What is it? Is that right? Fred for a Better America? Yeah. Okay, so I wrote this while I was in the middle of school. I just had my two older girls, and I was going to school, and it was interesting. There had been several people who had told me that I needed to get on like WIC or CHIP or these programs that or food stamps. And at the time, I think I was making, it was under $30,000 a year or something like that. Going to school full time, working full time, and I was able to get through school without going into any debt, and I was really grateful for that. I did borrow, I think, about $2,000 from my parents, which I paid back the year after I got out of school, but I did use a Pell Grant, but we were able to make it through without getting on like WIC and food stamps and CHIP and stuff like that. And anyways, there was a week where people had been telling me that I really needed to get on these programs, and I would hear things like, "Oh, they're made for us to use. That's what they're for," and it just didn't sit right with me, and I didn't know why. and I couldn't quite figure it out. And one night I was working on a group project with some buddies, and I was staying the night basically over in Logan. And so I was staying away from my family, and I was really just kind of frustrated that I was staying away from my family. And it was to get the school project done, and it was, I think, 4 a.m, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get my thoughts out, and I started this blog, and I think I put like 4 things on the blog. It's not much, but it's fredforabetteramerica.blogspot.com, and it goes like this. It says, "At what cost?" I said, "America. Filial cannibalism." So this was from 2013. Was it 2013? Yeah, March 2013. So this was just a little bit before I got the job that I'm as developer, and I was a sophomore in college at the time. And it says and I said filial cannibalism, the act of eating one's young. This tendency has been observed in many species, such as wolf spiders, polar bears, hamsters, cats, and many fish, insects, and birds. The practice is hard to justify from an evolutionary standpoint and harder to comprehend from a social or moral standpoint. Why would you try it? Would you try it on your kids? In America, we make choices that, though aren't as forward as filial cannibalism, might lead to a similar outcome. Before I get started, let me tell you a little of my situation. I am a 26-year-old college student with a wife and 2 beautiful girls, ages 1 and 2. I go to school full-time, and I work full-time. I am blessed with a job that allows me to support my family's basic needs. I have had friends and peers try to talk my wife and me into getting on programs such as CHIP, WIC, and food stamps. These programs would make my life much easier and even give me more time to see my kids. However, at what cost? From what I understand, I qualify for each of these programs. However, as long as I can avoid them, I will. For me, the cost is too great. I do not believe these programs are bad, nor do I attempt to judge or classify people who take part in them. My goal for writing this article is to share my perspective. These programs offer aid to those who are classified by the government as needing it. The cost of the aid given is a debt our government incurs. The way I view it, this debt will not be paid by me, but by my daughters, when they are young mothers and in a similar situation as me. How would I be able to handle an extra weight right now that represents the cost of my parents feeding me 20 years ago? I, as do all Americans, bear some of the weight of the past. Am I willing to give my girls a greater burden? Am I that self-preserving? Like the animal that eats its own offspring due to low food? To be clear, I'm not saying those who are on food stamps are cannibals or something ridiculous like that. If you want to be offended by my words, that's your choice. But please listen to my words. These programs from the government perform a good deed regardless of how efficient or inefficient those in need can benefit from these programs. Unfortunately, that good deed is slowly becoming in the minds of us as Americans a free right, with no thought of the cost. If you are a mother or father who is benefiting from CHIP, WIC, or food stamps, please ask yourself this question every time you receive these benefits. Is this worth making my child pay for it when he or she is in my position? Sometimes the answer will be yes, and that's okay. However, you need to always realize at what cost that benefit is coming. It is irresponsible and incorrect to think that someone else who can afford it is paying for it. The burden will ultimately end up on your children and my children. Understand the cost and remember, just because you qualify for these programs doesn't mean that they are worth that cost. No one will tell you where you fall, but you can figure it out if you care enough to put forth the effort. To those of you living paycheck to paycheck, where are you headed? I know and am reminded each week of how tight it can get. Don't lose hope. Look at where your current path is taking you, and if you don't like that destination, change it. It is your God-given right to pursue happiness, and no one can take that away from you. This land still is the land of opportunity. The burden of debt will keep you down. Get rid of it as soon as possible. Avoid it whenever possible. It is not a way to run a household or a country. Live within your means, and always avoid debt, for it is the enemy that never rests. It is up to you to better yourself through education. That doesn't only come through a school or organization. Read books that make you better or teach you skills. Do something that gives you control over the direction your life is going. If you need extra help, turn to your family, local churches, and local charities before you turn to the government. The government will give you with no strings attached. However, you will feel better if the support that comes to you has a face and a name behind it. When you pay it forward to someone else or pay it back to those who helped you, your character and self-respect are lifted. For those of you prominent members of the community, why is the federal government feeding those in need in your community? If you allow the federal government to run its current course, your children will be buried by the weights we are giving them. Realize that for each of your taxpayer dollars allocated to the welfare system, about 30 cents arrives in the hands of a worthy recipient. For each dollar given to a charity, about 70 cents arrives in the hands of a worthy recipient. Do you see the value in being part of your community's needs? I don't think there is one right way to fix each community, but I believe the people in each community, as Americans, can innovate and find ways to satisfy the majority of the needs in their respective community. It may be through food banks, local churches, or charities. It may just be taking some frozen meat to a neighbor who might need it. Unity is one of the things that makes our country strong, and that starts in the community and grows from there. Thinking back on that starts in the family, but community is a good place too. Have faith that people are generally good and will try and make good choices if given the chance. Remember, this isn't a problem we can leave alone until it goes away. If you don't help the people in this country stop relying on the government, then the country your children and grandchildren will grow up in will not be the America you know. Help your community be self-sufficient. I want you to know that I'm not on a soapbox, and I do not believe myself to be above this task. I see that this country will not be fixed until we the people fix it, regardless of who's in D.C. I love this country. I have seen its goodness and I have seen its strength. I have the hope that my children will grow old seeing that same thing. Not only do I have the hope, but I'm willing to work to make it so. This is my country, and in so being, it is my responsibility. God bless you. God bless America. It's interesting. I wrote that at a time where we had the Christmas before, just the 3 months before, we had literally nothing for our girls for Christmas. We didn't have a thing. It was heartbreaking in a sense. Like, we didn't have. I think we were able to get one doll for each of my girls, like one little doll, and that's all we could afford. We couldn't afford anything else. We just didn't have any money, and we were out in this farming community, and the people around us, from church, but I'm assuming it was from church. Somebody stopped by and dropped this big box off at our doorstep. and they took off. I never found out who it was, but they dropped off this big box, and in it there was toys, there was clothes for my girls, there was clothes for me and my wife, there was a Christmas ham, and there was just stuff for a good dinner, and there was just like, this was just a few days before Christmas, and it was just, man, when you're in that stage where you can't help yourself and you don't have anything more to give, but somebody comes and helps you, it makes you a better person. It makes you humble yourself before the Lord and give thanks. You appreciate it. And that's just, there's something about that when we live too free from struggle, we miss out. We become soft. We become weak. And it's made it so that now that I'm in a better place in my life, financially, I definitely take the time to help out where I can. When I see neighbors, when I see things, it makes me enjoy trying to make someone else's life better. And it's important when you do stuff like that. Christ taught, don't let your left hand see what your right hand does. Don't do it on the street corners so that everybody can see. But do it where God can see, and then just let him be the one that sees. And there's something fun and invigorating and awesome about going and being able to help someone and knowing that nobody will ever know and nobody will ever find out because you're in a way that you can do that. A good way that that you can do is you can just go and pay. When you know someone's having struggles, you just go and pay a utility bill for them. You don't need to ask. You don't need to tell anybody. Just do it. Just go and drop off some frozen meat. There was another family that was just neighbors down the street, and just a few weeks before that, they had butchered one of their lambs, I think, and they brought us over some lamb, and they're like, we're just thinking about you. And there was another family that did that. And when you're in a big city, my wife's from Romania. She's from Bucharest, which is the capital. It's a city that's got like 5 million people. You can lose yourself amongst people without gaining a community. You have to be very deliberate, and I'm not saying that it's bad to be in a city or anything like that. I'm just saying you have to be deliberate in creating community, in creating a bond with the people that you see and that you're with. And that community only comes through when you can. Well, one of the best ways is through service, is through helping others out. I've yapped on long enough. I don't know. Every day there's something to be grateful for. If you get depressed or get frustrated, that's okay. There's plenty of things to be depressed about, but there's a whole hell of a lot more things to be grateful for. There's a lot of things to be grateful for. And the more that you look, the easier it is to see. And the easier it is to get out of that sadness or that depression. And that's the thing, is like, yeah, every case is different. People have different needs and stuff like that. And so I'm not saying that I'm not trying to tell you what to do, or anybody, but I am saying that I've seen from my life that gratitude is really, it brings peace and it brings happiness. Bob says, great vlog tonight. Thanks, man. Yeah, my dad went to the army in the 90s, so we would not have to go on food stamps. My dad was a carpenter in the army when he was in Afghanistan. Carpentry is a good skill to have. Dude, that's awesome. My dad was, so there was, he was thinking of going, I don't think he was with the army, but he was thinking of going to do some carpentry internationally when, I think, was it internationally or was it in Florida? It might have been in Florida after, was it Katrina or something like that happened? Around that time. I think it was probably early 2000s, but I guess he had told me that he would have been able to make, in 1 year, working away from the family, you know, he would have been able to make 10 times as much as he would make, or make as much as he would make in 10 years here, you know. But he didn't. He stayed with the family. And, dude, that's awesome that your dad was not only willing, but had the skills to do that. Look for the people in your life that make sacrifices for you. And that's a good way to find where to be grateful. When I see like these videos or kids at the stores or whatever who say things like, I hate you to their parents, or they say things like, you never do this for me, or I never get that, or and they have this very me attitude. It's a little heartbreaking, it's a little annoying, it's a little frustrating, and I'm not saying, and it's one of those things where sometimes it's life. Sometimes your kids are just little stinkers, and they're just figuring out how to interact. Sometimes they're just really hungry, or they're really tired, you know, and they're just being little pains because of that, and that's okay. But one of the things that I try and teach my girls is, and we have this saying, it's like arrows in or arrows out. It's like, where are your arrows pointed? Are they out? Arrows out? And what that means, and what I've been kind of teaching them, is that when you're focused on yourself, your arrows are pointing in. It's me. Why for me? Why for why for this is what I want, what I'm concerned about myself. And your arrows pointed out, are you concerned about others? Are you concerned about helping? Are you concerned about making sure other people are taken care of and stuff like that? And it's just a little analogy, but it's a good way for us to have a friendly, not too naggy reminder that, hey, stop being a brat, stop being self-centered, you know. There's more than just you in the family and in the world, you know. And that's one of the best lessons I learned from my dad. I was working with him, and I think I've talked about it in one of the streams, but he said something to me where he was like, I learned that my opinion didn't matter. And it was like, sometimes it does, yeah. Most of the time it doesn't. And it was like mind-blowing to me. I was in high school at the time, and we were helping a lady build her house, and she was asking for advice on a cosmetic thing, and it could go either way. There was one way that I saw would have finished really nice, and that's how I would have suggested it. She asked my dad, and I was just listening. Dude, that's awesome. 2005 to 2006 in Afghanistan. That was a hotbed over there, wasn't it, at that time? I got a buddy who was in, I want to say Armadi. I don't remember the names, but in like 2006 or 7, and he was running convoys, and it was one of the hottest areas in the world at the time. He actually had he was a 50 cal. He was the gunner on the Humvee, and his Humvee got blown up, and it was just like, he was telling me these stories, and I was just like, man. That's when I went to Romania on my mission for my church, and he went he was deployed twice in Iraq, not Afghanistan, but yeah, it shows my geometry, which I meant to say geometry, making fun, but my geography is not the best. It's Middle East. Yeah, anyways, the thing that I was getting at, I guess, that lady asked our opinion, asked my dad her opinion, and my dad's like, I don't know. Or he didn't say, I don't know. He said, you could do it this way or this way. Or, he didn't give her a solid answer. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, why TBI? Is that, I don't know what TBI is. Is that tuberculosis? That doesn't sound right. TBI. But asked what or he told me, he's like it didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter because it was this lady's house and it was cosmetic and it was up to her, and that was just kind of a cool thing. Sorry, finish that story, but I'm gonna look up what TBI is because I don't know. Traumatic brain injury. Oh man. Got a TBI. Well, I hope that I don't want to. I don't know. It's interesting. You don't want to try and get too personal, but like, I hope he's all right. If he's still alive, I hope he's all right, and I hope that like things go well for him. Which that was 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and so hopefully he's all right. And if he has passed on, God bless him, man. I think I'm gonna call it a night. Last night I pulled pretty much an all-nighter doing work, trying to catch up on some of the stuff that I was working on. Hey Bob, thanks for your comments. Thanks for the stream, for checking in. I still have things that I want to do as far as getting some of those videos made, but let me show you another one. I made these self-plugs that I think are fantastic, and really they're probably kind of dumb, but I like them. 1 second. Is this one of those self-plug things? I'm such a gomer. Well, God bless him, man. I hope that he's recovered from his brain injury. I hope that things are going well for him, and I'm sure you tell him, or I don't know if you do or not, but thank him for his service if you get a chance. That's one of the things my buddy, he oh, thank you, man. My wife, she teases me because she's like, it's like you're awkward, and that's one of the things that I'm very, very rarely am I in real life, like in person, am I actually awkward. Sometimes I am, but it's pretty rare. And she teases me and stuff, and as she was as she's like, why are you singing? Why are you doing this? And she was teasing me, and as I did a few of them and I got into it, she's like, you're not as awkward anymore. Good job. And I'm like, thanks, babe. But my buddy who was in Iraq on was it Memorial Day? I don't remember what day. It was either Veterans or Memorial. And I just called him and talked to him. And I was like, we don't talk about it much, but I just thank you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your example to me. And I told him he was one of my heroes, because he is. He's a stud, and he's also kind of a douchebag. That's one of the reasons why I like him so much. I don't know. We get along so dang well. We're so different. He's the one that's doesn't mind being confrontational. I'm the one that I'm never confrontational, but yet I'm confrontational sometimes, but I'm straight up honest. And he's one of those friends that you can tell him when, hey, I was like, dude, you're being an ass, and I shouldn't swear so much, but anyways, he's like, you could tell him, like, and he'd be like, yeah, you're kind of right. And he'd be like, well, sometimes you need it. And, we just find people that you can, if my kids take anything from this video specifically, probably be grateful is the biggest thing. And to help others in secret. But the fourth or third or whatever number I'm at, find people who you can speak your mind to and they don't leave you. That's, as you get older, if you haven't lost some of your friends, you're not maturing much. It's kind of one of the truths of life, I think, is as we're young, we're all happy-go-lucky, or we don't know what's going on. But as we get older and we figure things out more, and as we mature better, we lose some of those people that they just don't matter as much to you, because you've got priorities, you've got responsibilities, you've got duties, and you've got things that you need to take care of, and that's just life. Well, hey, I'm gonna take off, guys. Rock the party. I don't even know where the stop button is. There it is. See ya, Bob. Thanks for coming in today.